people in my town say I'm the scariest man alive, which is hilarious because I'm literally just the butcher. Not a butcher, the butcher. The one who can break down a hog so clean, the bones look like they were assembled by IKEA. And that morning, I just finished the annual pig slaughter for New Year's orders. Apron soaked, boots muddy, hands smelling like steel and work. When I headed back toward the village with a tricycle cart full of pork I needed to deliver before it went warm. And halfway down a back road, I saw her. A woman on the roadside, young, pale, very pregnant, curled like she'd been dropped there. The kind of pretty that makes you think this person has never had to carry her own groceries in her life. And she was breathing, but the way she was clenching her jaw and shaking against her belly made it obvious she was minutes away from giving birth. So I swore under my breath, because my first thought, honestly, was if she gives birth in the dirt, I am not equipped. I am not a midwife. I am a man with pork and problems, but I'm not heartless or a monster. I'm just practical. So I did what any responsible citizen would do and called 911, and because my brain is wired like a butcher's, direct, efficient, no poetry, I said, "Hey, I found a pregnant woman, she's in rough shape, I'm covered in blood, don't freak out. I'm out on County Road 8, please send help." Then because I was holding my knife from sharpening it for work, and my hands were slick, I snapped a quick photo to show my location and what was going on, completely failing to consider how it looked from the outside. Giant man, soaked in blood, holding a freshly sharpened knife, standing over a pregnant woman on the ground. Because to me it was documentation, and to the dispatcher it was apparently the poster for a true crime documentary. And because I tried to be funny, bad habit, nervous habit, I added, "Please hurry, I sell by the pound," then hung up thinking, wow, good deed done, back to pork deliveries. And not 5 minutes later, my entire life detonated as a helicopter roared over the trees like the apocalypse had a pilot. And I saw 3 red dots dancing on my chest and forehead. And I squinted up, genuinely impressed, thinking, damn, even ambulances have helicopter service now. City healthcare is wild. So I did the friendly thing and waved with the knife and pointed down at the woman like, right here, she needs help. And the loudspeaker boomed, "Drop the weapon, get on the ground. You have the right to remain silent." And I blinked. Weapon? Looked down at my knife, the same knife that puts food on my table, felt offended on principle and muttered, "This isn't a weapon, this is my livelihood." And that was the exact moment black-clad men poured out from the trees like shadows with health insurance. Rifles that looked like they cost more than my house, one screaming, "Don't move," and I panicked. My boots slipped in the mud, and because the universe loves slapstick, I stumbled forward directly toward the pregnant woman, which from above must have looked like I was about to finish her off. So, a gunshot cracked into the dirt by my foot. Mud and grit splashed my face, and then I was on the ground with my cheek pressed into the road, and my arm twisted behind me so hard I saw stars. Yelping, "Ow, ow, hey, easy, I'm a butcher," while the guy on top of me yelled back louder, "You're a psycho killer," and I screamed, "No, I sell pork," as they slapped cuffs on me and my cart full of meat sat there baking in the sun like a tragedy. And while they shoved me into an armored vehicle, I tried to reason with the closest officer. "Can I at least cover the pork? Mrs. Patterson ordered a whole loin, and if it spoils she'll curse my bloodline. I'll never get married." Only for him to stare at me like I'd requested a snack mid-murder trial, and say, "Shut up, you'll get your chance to explain." And I thought miserably, city cops, no customer service at all. Under fluorescent lights, bright enough to interrogate my soul, I faced 2 detectives, a man with a face like a brick wall, and a woman who looked nice until she opened her eyes. Then the man slammed the table. "Name." And I said, "Jack Cutter," because that's what everyone calls you when you swing a cleaver for a living. And he snorted, "Of course it is." And I protested it was my real name, family business, Cutter like cutting. Until he leaned in and demanded, "Tell us what you did to the pregnant woman." And I sat up relieved. "Thank you. Okay, I was on my way back to town, saw her on the roadside, looked urgent, so I called 911. But the woman narrowed her eyes. "And you told the dispatcher you sell her by the pound," and I winced. Bad joke, butcher brain, you understand. Except they did not understand. The man's voice went cold, asking where the blood came from. And I brightened, explaining it wasn't hers, not human, pig blood. I was working, didn't have time to change, which made the woman flare. Working? On her? And I snapped, "No, working on the pig." But the man clenched his fist because I'd said I was about to start, and my words tripped over each other, trying to explain sharpening and delivering meat, until the woman snapped, "So you did start?" And I said confused, "Well, yeah, if you don't start, nothing gets done." And her pen froze as the man's eyes widened. "You started what exactly?" And I sighed because city folks were slow, and explained pigs have complications. One was stuck, so I had to open it up, and the room went dead silent. The woman repeated slowly and dangerously, "You opened it up." And I nodded proudly. Clean incision, quick, barely suffered. Piglet came out pink as a peach. Best work I'd done all month. At which point the woman made a strangled sound and rushed out like she was about to meet God in the restroom. The man flipped the table screaming, "You animal, we're gonna..." And I recoiled, yelling, Wait, I'm talking about a pig," while he tried to climb over the wall to strangle me. And then the door opened, and a man in a tailored suit that probably cost more than my entire cart walked in with the police chief practically bowing behind him. Looked like money with a pulse. Stared at me with eyes colder than my butcher's steel. Didn't ask who I was or what happened. Just said quietly, "Which hand touched my wife?" And I stared. "Your wife?" Because I was still cuffed when he stepped forward. And when I tried to explain, he kicked the chair out from under me so hard I hit the floor face first, while the chief stared at the wall like it contained inspirational quotes about ignoring violence. And the rich man crouched, grabbed my collar, hissed, "If Chloe and my child have so much as a scratch, I'll carve you into dog food." And I trembled because he said it like he'd done worse for less. Mr. Caldwell, Mrs. Caldwell woke up, and Grant Caldwell released me like trash and strode out, pausing at the door to toss over his shoulder, "Bring him, she'll identify him." So they dragged me through a hallway packed with bodyguards into a VIP room where Chloe lay pale but awake and a newborn screamed in a cradle. And Grant held her hand like he'd been drowning and she was air, looking at her like, "Tell me who to destroy." Then Chloe's eyes found me. I tried to smile politely, even though I was covered in blood and escorted like a serial killer. Grant growled, "Don't you dare threaten her." Chloe stared at me 3 seconds and burst into tears, gasping, "Why is he in handcuffs?" Freezing the room as Grant blinked, "Chloe, key," and she pointed at me like I was the only sane person there. He saved me. He called 911. He carried me to his cart and covered me with his jacket. He's the reason the baby and I are alive. And Grant's face ran through 7 emotions at once, while Chloe sniffled, trying not to laugh, adding that I said something about "not fresh, sell by the pound," which was terrifying, but I mean. T the pork. The police chief's mouth fell open. I straightened as much as cuffs allowed. "See? Good citizen, slightly misunderstood, but good." Grant stared like he wanted to apologize and fight me simultaneously. And 5 minutes later they uncuffed me, and a check appeared in Grant's hand like magic. $100,000 for the misunderstanding and for saving my family. And I took it with my eyes bugging out at the zeros. Then, because I am who I am, I said, "No problem. Also, Chloe, you look like you need protein. I can bring you some pork loin, best cut, helps recovery." And Grant's jaw twitched like he was chewing glass. "That won't be necessary." So I shrugged and walked out 10 feet tall, thinking the story was over. Except it wasn't, because my SWAT arrest video hit the internet, and overnight my town stopped calling me Jack and started calling me Pork Chop Hannibal. And that was just the beginning. After the video went viral, people bought pork from me like I was an attraction at the county fair. Except they'd toss money from 6 feet away like I had rabies and Satan's blessing. And Mrs. Patterson, my harshest critic, would throw cash on the counter and sprint off with her bag like I might saute her in front of witnesses. And I hated it. But then on a slow afternoon, a black van rolled up to my stall, and 4 men stepped out. Big, heavy bodies built for intimidation and bad decisions. Their leader wearing sunglasses and a gold chain thick enough to anchor a boat. And he knocked on my cutting board like he owned the wood. "You Jack Cutter?" And I didn't even look up because I was trimming ribs. Just said, "If you're buying meat, get in line." And he smiled without warmth. "Heard you worked on a pregnant lady the other day," which made my stomach drop. So I set my cleaver down gently and warned him I didn't have time for rumors because I had orders. But he leaned in, saying she had something on her, a piece of hardware. Where was it? And my mind flashed back to her clenched hand and the dark little object that might have fallen into my cart. The tiny black metal piece I'd found later and tossed into my junk box like a broken bolt. And I kept my face blank, no idea, until he sighed like I disappointed him. and told his guys to search the place. And that was the moment my patience died, because I slammed my cleaver into the cutting board. Bam! Hard enough to make the handle vibrate, and said calmly, "This is my stall. You don't search anything." And they hesitated until the leader pulled off his sunglasses and promised they'd loosen my bones. Batons came out, and I looked up at the sky muttering, "Lord, why is selling pork harder than paying taxes?" Then he swung first, baton whistling for my head, and I didn't flinch because I dodged panicked pigs my whole life. So, I sidestepped and snapped the flat of my cleaver, not the blade, into his wrist. Crack, baton flying, him screaming like he'd discovered pain for the first time. And the other three charged only to learn two things fast. A butcher's arms are built like farm machinery, and I do not need to cut you to ruin your day. So in under a minute, all four were on the ground groaning like pigs before slaughter. Alive, humbled, while I crouched by the leader and tapped my cleaver against his cheek, like a lullaby, and said pleasantly, "Tell me what you want or I'll remove your confidence in layers." And sweating, he finally admitted it was a chip with Caldwell Group secrets. Their people needed it. Caldwell, Grant Caldwell. My brain clicking as I realized that bolt wasn't junk. It was war. And then sirens wailed and I froze. Please don't be SWAT again. Except it wasn't. It was Officer Hank Lee, our local cop who used to let gamblers finish the hand before arresting them, and he arrived, took one look at four grown men on the ground, then looked at me, clean, calm, holding a cleaver, and sighed like a tired father. "Jack, what now?" And I raised both hands. Self-defense. They tried to rob my pee. Ark! While one man sobbed that I was a demon who treats people like pigs, and Hank rolled his eyes. "Everybody's a victim." Ordered cuffs for them, and told me I was coming too, for paperwork. And at the station, I was barely seated before Grant Caldwell walked in with no bodyguards, just him holding a fruit basket like he'd lost a bet, setting it down and studying me, with respect mixed with irritation, as he explained those men were sent by his competitor to steal that chip. And I told him I didn't care about his fancy chip. I cared about selling pork without getting attacked like I'm in an action movie. But Grant exhaled and said they wouldn't stop, and because I'd helped his wife, I was now a problem. I asked if I should move. He said they find me anywhere. Then he dropped the sentence that changed my life. "Come work for me." And I laughed. As what, the CEO's emotional support butcher? Until he said evenly I didn't need a suit. Just be me. Cook, cut meat. And when danger shows up, handle it. And I opened my mouth to refuse until he offered $10,000 a month. I started to say no again. He corrected himself. $50,000 a month. And my words died in my throat as I nodded like a man who understood business. Deal. And just like that, I went from pork vendor to live-in bodyguard in a mansion so big the guest bathroom was larger than my shop. Packing 3 things, my slaughter knife, my boning knife, and my whetstone. Because if rich people were dragging me into their world, I was bringing my own rules. The Caldwell mansion looked like it had been built to intimidate the sky. Marble floors, glass chandeliers, a kitchen that could host a cooking show and a war. And Chloe, warm and grateful and still recovering, hugged me like I was family, saying she finally felt safe, while Grant nodded once, serious as a funeral, telling me if anything happens, I move first. And the only person who didn't like me was the butler, Mr. Price, thin and stiff with hair slicked like he feared joy, staring at my knives like they were crimes, and announcing my tools would not be mixed with their kitchen cutlery. So I frowned and told him my tools were blessed by hard work, and his were blessed by a store credit card, which made him look like he wanted to faint. And that night, Grant hosted a dinner for wealthy guests who wanted entertainment, Chloe beaming and telling me to show them my skills. So they wheeled in half a hog like it was a centerpiece, and under the chandelier, in front of people wearing watches that could buy my car, I inhaled once and did what I do. No tricks, no drama, just precision. Skin off, meat separated, joints open clean, bones stacked like art. And 5 minutes later, the hog was plated into perfect cuts, and the skeleton laid out so neat, the room went silent before applause crashed like thunder. Grad satisfied, Chloe delighted, Mr. Price looking like he'd seen a murder. And I thought this job would be easy. Cook, cut, scare away idiots. Until I woke up to soft steps in the nursery, too soft for a nanny or guard, something careful. So I slipped out barefoot with my boning knife, not because I wanted violence, but because I respect possibility. Found the nursery door cracked, peeked in and saw a shadow over the crib, holding a syringe. My blood going cold, because you can mess with me or my stall or even my pork, but you do not reach for a baby. And I didn't yell because yelling gets babies killed. I moved like I move around a panicked hog, quiet, controlled, fast. And the moment the needle hovered above the child's skin, I grabbed the wrist. Pop, bones shifting out of place, the shadow hissing as the syringe dropped, and I slammed them into the wall, pinning them hard and whispering, "Move again and I'll make you regret having joints." Then lights exploded on as Grant and Chloe rushed in with guards, revealing the attacker was a woman in a nanny uniform, glaring with poison, Grant's face turning steel as he surged forward, ready to kill her with bare hands. Until I stopped him. "Don't. Check the syringe. That's evidence." And Mr. Price took it with shaking hands as the fake nanny spat that I ruined everything. And Chloe went pale, whispering she was one of them, the group that's been after us. Grant's jaw tightening because they can't keep running, and I frowned, telling him his security is a sieve, since someone walked into the nursery with a needle, asking if he wanted my honest butcher opinion. And when he said yes, I told him he doesn't have a safety problem. He has a war problem. And Grant stared, then admitted there was a gala downtown, tomorrow night, and their leader would be there. And I blinked, asking if he wanted me to chop him into hors d'oeuvres. But Grant said no. He needed me to distract him with my skill and presence, to buy time to expose them. And I rubbed my temple, saying I'm a butcher, not a magician, until he said he'd double my pay, and I nodded immediately, suddenly a very motivated magician. So at the gala I stood in a chef's jacket, beside a golden roasted suckling pig, while the room glittered with wealth and fake smiles. I scanned faces until I found the heavy man with small eyes, laughing like a saint, and smelling like violence in expensive cologne. And he approached, intrigued by my knife work, praising my hands and offering me a job. And I smiled politely, sliced the pig's skin so thin it curled like paper, then looked up and said, "I prefer my pigs honest." And he looked a little too greasy, his smile dying as the air tightened and guards shifted. And then the ballroom screens lit up with video evidence, deals, kidnappings, money trails, throwing the room into chaos as the leader roared Grant's name. Guns came out, people ran, and I sighed, because of course the first time I wear clean clothes, somebody starts shooting. And when the leader aimed a pistol at my head, I didn't panic. I slammed the entire hot, oily, roasted pig into his face and yelled, "Eat your pork," making him scream like the hog did earlier. And the shooters turned on me, so I dove behind the metal prep table as bullets sparked off steel. Ping, 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 loud enough to rattle my bones. Shouting at Grant that this is not buying time, this is me becoming a target. And Grant shouted, "SWAT is coming," and I yelled I'd heard that before. Then I listened for footsteps, the way I read animals by breath. 3 men moving in, 2 right, 1 left, popped up and threw 2 knives like darts, thunk thunk, hitting wrists so guns dropped, and when a third raised his weapon, I flung a heavy cleaver, flat side into his forehead, and he dropped like a bad habit. And finally, the windows shattered, and SWAT rappelled in with the same lines, same drama, same "don't move." And for the first time in my life, I almost cried from relief as they cleared the room and arrested the leader. Grant clapping my shoulder, saying I did great while I panted, "Great, pay me with interest," and he grinned, "Done," and I thought that was the end, until the leader dragged past me, leaned close with cruel amusement, and whispered that I think I know who the monster is, but the woman I saved is the devil. And I froze, looked across the room at Chloe holding the baby and leaning into Grant soft and fragile and grateful. Forced a laugh, telling myself it was a dying man's lie. Until that night I walked past the study for water and heard my name through the cracked door. Chloe's voice sweet as honey, cold as ice, saying, "Jack Cutter can't stay." Grant hesitating that I helped them. Chloe replying, "I saw too much, and I'm too capable and unpredictable." Grant whispering, "So what do we do?" Chloe not pausing, "Tomorrow, stage an accident, make him disappear." And my hands went numb, throat went dry, standing in the dark hallway, listening to the 2 people I bled for schedule my death like a dentist appointment. Understanding in their world, I'm not the hero, I'm the pig. Backing away silently, returning to my room, laying my knives out like old friends, and whispering, "All right, you want to butcher me. Then, let's see whose blade is sharper." Morning came like nothing happened. Because that's the thing about rich people who plan to kill you. They still smile at breakfast, still ask if you slept well, still wear soft colors and pretend their hearts aren't made of ice. And I stood in the Caldwell kitchen, flipping eggs and stirring congee like normal live-in help, while Chloe drifted in wearing silk with perfect hair and a baby monitor clipped to her waistband like she was motherhood in a magazine. And Grant followed with his tie straight and eyes tired, like a man who thinks money can buy control. Chloe smiling warmly. "Morning, Jack. Sleep okay?" And I looked at her the way you look at a hog that's smiling too much. Answered, "Like a rock. You?" And she smiled, "Same." Of course she did, because she slept just fine after scheduling my death. Then I served breakfast, congee, dumplings, eggs, Grant's favorite buns. And yes, I added something special, not poison, because I'm a butcher, not a coward, but an old farm trick. A calm-down herbal paste we feed pigs when they get wild. Takes the edge off, knocks them out, makes a beast quiet, and works on humans too, if you know the dose. So Chloe and Grant ate like royalty, while Mr. Price watched me like I was a disease. And 10 minutes later, Grant rubbed his temple, asking why he felt heavy, as Chloe blinked slow, like her eyelids had weights sewn in. Her finger lifting toward me accusing, but her arm moving underwater. And I said kindly, "Just breakfast. Sit, rest." Grant trying to stand, making it halfway, then collapsing on the table with a soft, humiliating thud. Chloe fighting harder, eyes sharp, even as her body betrayed her, and for a second the mask slipping. Pure hatred, pure calculation, hissing my name with slurred rage and telling me I don't know what I'm doing. And I stepped closer, saying, "Oh, I know exactly what I'm doing," as she tried to reach for something, and I grabbed her necklace, the lock pendant she never took off, her hand twitching toward my wrist, me snapping it open like breaking a chicken bone, so a tiny memory card slipped into my palm. Mr. Price gasping like I'd ripped out a holy relic. Grant mumbling, "Chloe, what?" while Chloe's pupils burned, demanding I give it back. And I leaned down close enough for her to smell the metal and iron that never leaves a butcher, and said softly, "No, this is the part where you stop lying." Then guards poured into the kitchen, big and armed and confident, until Mr. Price barked, "I can't leave because the estate is secured." So I held up the card and told him he can watch his boss's wife take a nap while I walk out. A guard raising his weapon, then hesitating, because nobody wants to be the guy who accidentally shoots the billionaire, dragged him toward the door as leverage, and said, "Open the door or I start breaking things you can't fix." And they opened it not from respect, but fear of what I'd do next. And outside, a police cruiser screamed up the driveway, like the universe was personally invested in ruining my day. Officer Hank Lee stepping out with a squad, calling my name with disappointed dad energy, telling me to put down the weapon, me freezing. 'Cause Hank was my town's cop, the guy who once let a drunk finish his story before cuffing him. Me yelling they're trying to kill me, and Hank shaking his head, saying these are well-known business people, and I'm holding Mr. Caldwell, which looks like kidnapping. And right then Chloe stumbled out with watery eyes, messy hair, small voice, clutching her throat like she'd been attacked, crying that I drugged them, stole her necklace, and was going to kill them and run. And I stared, because I've seen pigs fake innocence, but never acting like that on a human face. Hank's eyes hardening on me as I looked around at cops, guns, guards, cameras, a beautiful victim, sobbing like an angel. And me, the viral scary story, knowing that if I went back to the station, I was finished. E-money talks and I don't speak their language. So I whispered, "Sorry, Hank," and did what I do best. Moved fast, shoved a chair into one guard, shoulder-checked another, sprinted over the hedge, across the lawn, through the side gate, past the fountain as sirens erupted behind me. And just like that, I became a fugitive with a memory card burning in my pocket like a match. I didn't run to be dramatic. I ran because I know what happens when rich people decide you're inconvenient. They don't fight you in daylight, they bury you quietly and call it an accident. So I ducked into an old place on the edge of town, an abandoned slaughterhouse. My slaughterhouse, my past, my sanctuary. And the smell of iron and cold concrete hit me like a memory, while rusted hooks hung from ceiling rails and conveyor belts creaked in the wind like they were still working. Ugly and familiar and honest. And I found an office corner with an ancient computer that still worked if you hit it twice, and threatened it once. Hands steady as I plugged in the memory card and watched the screen blink and load. And what came up wasn't a patent or roadmap or corporate file, but a list. Names, numbers, transactions. An entire network of organ trafficking. Illegal donor pipelines, shell companies, offshore accounts, payments tied to inventory. Human inventory. My mouth going dry as I saw Chloe Caldwell, not as a victim, but as an operator, a coordinator, a smiling face outside with a knife behind her back. And Grant not as mastermind, but frontman, a clean suit making dirty work look respectable. My stomach turning as I realized the assassination attempts, rivals, the organization weren't chaos attacking them. It was Chloe conducting a symphony, killing competitors, erasing loose ends, writing her own redemption arc. The pig never being the fat leader at the gala, but the man she set up to take the fall, and the pig being me for saving her. Then a boot slammed into the front door, shaking the whole building, and a voice slid through the darkness like a razor. Jack Cutter. My skin going cold because I didn't need to look to know it was Chloe. The door crashing open, floodlights hitting the windows, men in tactical gear pouring in with night vision and rifles. Not cops, not SWAT. Private mercenaries, real killers. Chloe stepping in behind them with no tears and no softness. Eyes pure winter. Telling me to give her the card and she'll let me die quick. And I laughed one sharp ugly sound, held up the card, and asked if she really thought she could buy silence with a bullet. She tilted her head yes. I said too late, and hit enter. Email window, attachments, recipients, state investigators, federal contacts, local and national media. Everything queued. Send. The computer whirring as the progress bar crawled forward. Chloe's face going white. No, she breathed. Then her mouth twisting as she barked, kill him. Mercenaries raising guns, the bar hitting 100%. Sent. And I smiled, congratulated her that her secret just went on sale by the pound. And when Chloe screamed, shred him, and gunfire erupted, I sprinted into the slaughterhouse shadows. The place designed for death with conveyor belts, iron hooks, slick floors, narrow corridors that slow outsiders and protect me. Because they came in with weapons, but I came in with home field advantage. Yanked the main breaker, killed the lights, let darkness slam down like a curtain. And in the black my voice stayed calm. Welcome to my world. And then I moved. Night vision goggles glowed green as mercenaries spread out moving careful and professional. But they didn't know the floor or rails or drains or where the hooks swing. And I did. So I caught the first man from behind with my forearm hard across the throat. Silent and brutal. Dropped him without a scream. Slid his goggles onto my own head, and now the dark belonged to me too, as I watched them search with muzzles up and controlled breathing, while Chloe stayed near the door surrounded barking orders with a voice that never cracked, snapping that she wanted me alive until she saw me suffer. And I smiled and turned on the conveyor belt. Machinery roaring, chains rattling, hooks sliding overhead. The sudden noise spooking them into firing at shadows. Sparks flying. Bullets pinging off steel. And I used the chaos as cover, because I didn't stab and I didn't have to. Every butcher learns you don't need to cut to control. You hit joints, break leverage, take away power. So I came in low, slammed a knee into a man's side, twisted his elbow the wrong way, and he went down choking back a scream, shoved him into a hanging rail hard enough to vomit. Another turned too slow, and my boning knife's flat side cracked his wrist, gun dropping. I kicked it away. Footsteps behind me. I pivoted, ducked under a rifle butt, smacked a throat with the edge of my hand, down. And in less than 2 minutes, half her men were either unconscious or moaning like pigs on a bad day. Chloe's breathing changing, confidence cracking as she hissed, "Where is he?" And I stepped out in front of her with goggles glowing and my slaughter knife in hand. Not raised, just present, freezing her and making the remaining mercenaries' hands shake, because fear is contagious and I was the virus. Chloe stammering for me not to come closer as I took one slow step, then another, and asked lightly if she'd ever been in a slaughterhouse when the lights go out. Her eyes flicking to exits, shadows, hooks overhead like they might reach down and grab her. Me stopping 3 feet away and telling her she tried to make me the pig. Bad choice. Chloe snapping her hand to her waistband, gun firing, me moving as the bullet clipped steel and sparked, my wrist flicking to throw my knife flat and controlled straight into her gun barrel, metal snapping, gun bursting, Chloe screaming and dropping it as her hand recoiled, falling backwards, scrambling like a cornered animal, and suddenly spilling money promises. She had money, so much money, while I crouched close enough for her to smell the blood that never leaves a butcher, and told her money doesn't wash rot. She sobbed please, and sirens rose outside. Real sirens. Police, federal agents, tactical units, because my email had done its job. Chloe looking past me at lights flooding the windows, fear shifting to pure hatred as she tried to crawl away. Me grabbing her wrist and holding her steady like holding a hog, so it doesn't hurt itself. And then the doors blew open with, "Police, drop your weapons," guns trained into the darkness, as Hank Lee charged in first and stared at the scene. Mercenaries down, weapons scattered, Chloe in the corner injured and twisted. Then his gaze landing on me, covered in grime, standing like I belonged there. His jaw dropping as he breathed my name, me raising my hands and stepping away from Chloe, saying this time I'm the one who called it in. Hank staring between Chloe and me like he finally understood the difference between butcher and monster, swallowing and asking quietly if I did all this alone, and I shrugged, it's my house. While agents rushed past cuffing Chloe and securing evidence, Chloe thrashing and screaming that this isn't the end. Me leaning in just enough to tell her it is for her, because I already sold her story. And they hauled her into the light as the darkness finally lifted. The next week was a blur of statements, agents, paperwork, and reporters shoving microphones in my face, trying to turn me into a headline. Butcher takes down organ trafficking ring. Small-town meat vendor saves baby. Destroys cartel. And when they asked if I was trained, I told them the truth, that I'd been trained by angry pigs for 20 years, and pigs teach you fast. And when they asked if I felt like a hero, I shrugged that I felt like a man who didn't want to die. And Grant Caldwell, once the cold suit who threatened to carve me into dog food, showed up at the station, looking like he'd been living inside a nightmare he didn't recognize. No fruit basket this time. Just apology. Standing in front of me like the ground was unstable, saying he didn't know, and he swore he didn't know. And I looked at him and saw a man who married a storm, and called it love. Told him he knows now, and that's what matters. And when he asked what I wanted, money, a house, anything, I said I wanted my tricycle cart fixed, and I wanted people to stop throwing money at me like I'm cursed. Grant letting out a shaky laugh, saying he can fix the cart, but the second might take time. And he was right, because the internet never forgets, and to them I'd always be the guy in the viral clip, bloody, holding a knife, waving at a helicopter like a friendly psychopath. So even though the town slowly stopped being afraid, it never fully went away. Mrs. Patterson still tossing cash from a distance, then lingering a second longer before running, until one day she finally asked if I was, and I offered, a murderer, and she nodded, and I sighed, no ma'am, I'm just a butcher. And she squinted and said, yeah, well, you butchered the right people, so good job. Which was her version of an apology, and I accepted it, went back to selling pork. Same stall, same knives, same whetstone. Except sometimes late at night I'd still hear that progress bar in my head, and think about Chloe's face when she realized she couldn't buy her way out. And I'd sharpen my blade slowly, and whisper, next time I see a rich woman on the roadside, pause, smile, I'm calling an ambulance first. Because I'm still a good citizen. I'm just smarter now. And I've learned one rule that matters more than anything. In this world, you don't survive by being the strongest. You survive by knowing who the real pig is, and refusing to get on the hook.